Livestream show where we showcase amazing Australian women speakers so you get to see the huge amount of talent available, and so we can shift the stats from 30% women speakers at events to 50%. Joining me today is the wonderful Dr Neryl East CSP, leadership keynote speaker and trusted advisor. A professional speaker and credibility expert who's worked with leaders at the highest levels of government and business, Neryl's presentations, masterclasses, and coaching enables people to become comfortable, confident, and credible communicators, able to build trusting relationships and deliver clear messages under pressure. She's also Australia's leading authority on local government communication. Welcome to the show, Neryl. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody. Great to be here.
Fabulous. It is absolutely wonderful to have you here. And I love that communication is your jam. Tell me, how long have you been doing that for?
Well, I'm not going to embarrass myself by saying how many decades, Rachel, but I've been a professional communicator all of my career, from my time in the media and then in senior corporate communication roles, and now as a professional speaker, facilitator and trusted advisor, which I've been doing that bit formally for about 15 years, but yeah, going back quite a few decades before that.
Wow. So what actually got you into doing what you do now? So what were the steps involved in transitioning you from, all those early years of all those roles that you had, and now you've been doing the last 15 years of, being training people, being in front of people. How did you make that transition? What was your journey?
I reckon I've always been in front of audiences. I mean, even when I was a kid, but when I entered the workforce as a TV and radio journalist, you are in front of audiences in different ways. And then even in my corporate roles, I was always the one emceeing the big events, and some of them were very large events, and getting up in front of people. And it's something that I've always felt comfortable with. Some people are terrified of speaking, of course, but they've got talents in other areas. They abseil and skydive and all of those things, which terrify me. My comfortable place is in front of an audience. And I heard about professional speaking. I can't exactly remember how, probably something I saw on social media.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, is that a thing? And then I started to learn about it and discovered that there's a whole body of, communities around that, and got heavily involved in Professional Speakers Australia and some other networks. And then over time transitioned out of my, full paying job, which is always terrifying, slowly built my business up. So even though what I'm doing now, I call myself a professional speaker, I think I've been a professional speaker for much longer than that.
Yes. Your career spans, so many experiences of speaking and hosting, emceeing, I would imagine you've done some voiceover work at some stage.
Yeah, I have indeed. That's getting a little harder now because, competition and AI, but certainly voiced my share of commercials and corporate videos, all of those sorts of things. Absolutely.
Yes. You would have so many stories to tell. So many stories, and unfortunately we do not have time to hear them all. But what I would love to know is, considering, what you have been doing for the last little while, how would you say what it is exactly that you speak about?
I show leaders and organisations how to be more believable, dependable, and reputable by being trustworthy, building credibility and connection, especially under pressure. Now, that could be in a public pressure situation. Equally, it could be in a situation behind the scenes, a one-on-one conversation where the stakes are high, a board meeting, any number of other scenarios. I call those spotlight situations. The pressure's on, the stakes are high, the outcome really matters. So that's the space I tend to play in. So that could be helping a leader prepare for a major media event. Equally, it could be helping an executive team or a whole audience have more influence, more credibility in their day-to-day communication.
Wow. So, where my brain goes? My brain goes to, you must have been in so many situations where you have been in those spotlight situations. And is it something that you had to learn on the spot, or how did you come to know how to show other people how to do exactly that?
It's a fabulous question because, in my experience, and you might have a different view, and others watching might also, but I have found that not many people just arrive on Earth as amazing communicators. There are probably a handful, and maybe you know one or two people like that, but the rest of us have to learn the skills as we
Yes.
go. And also, the vast majority of us have self-doubt, sometimes crippling self-doubt, imposter syndrome, all those things, and that is absolutely my experience. I've really, grappled with imposter syndrome my whole life. And so it was really part of, I guess, overcoming those challenges, because it's kind of a weird contradiction. I love being in front of audiences, but I've always had this critical voice in my head that I've had to learn the tools myself to be able to put that aside and be at my best in a spotlight, whether it's a literal one or one behind the scenes. And so I think over time, I've just built some tools. Some I've learnt formally, some just through trial and error. I know what works and what doesn't. And I've also had the privilege of learning from some amazing leaders who I've been coaching, and just being in their presence, I've picked up even more. And that's given me a suite of tools that now I find really helps people in those critical situations. It's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think, for anybody watching, because so many of us have that self-doubt and think, oh, I can't be confident, all of those things, even very senior leaders grapple with those thoughts every day. And the truly great ones have just learned in the moment just to put that to one side. It sounds oversimplified, but it's true, so that they can be on, whether that's for a 10-minute conversation or a 1-hour presentation or whatever it is. So we can all do it just through determination and applying the tools.
That is so encouraging, I have to say, because we can come across as confident, but who knows what's going on inside our head.
Totally.
I think that imposter syndrome is just incredibly common. We all suffer from it, and as soon as we feel eyes on us, there is a tendency to become much more self-conscious than we need to, and the ability to stand confidently and just go, I know what I'm talking about, is an incredibly important place to be. And I would imagine that you cover a lot on imposter syndrome in terms of one of the things you have to overcome to be able to be a confident communicator. Is that right?
That definitely comes up, Rachel. I describe it as the power of managing your inner state. Because not everybody identifies with imposter syndrome. Some people have different ways of different demons that they have to grapple with. But it all comes down to, if you're in a situation where you really need to communicate a message, whether that's in front of an audience or with a team member or even a member of your family, that's not the time to be giving into that inner turmoil. So it's, what are some of the tools we can apply to tap into that in the moment, and just put some things in place to manage that inner state. That's one of the 3 crucial elements, I think, that need to be in place if we want to be effective and impactful under pressure. Being confident isn't necessarily one of those. Confidence just comes from surviving a risk. I can't make anybody confident, even though they constantly ask me. It's about, you've got to do something that feels risky and survive. And so for many of us, that's actually communicating in a pressure situation. We do it and we survive. So next time our brain is saying, well, hey, I was okay last time, so I can do it again. I can do it again. And that's really how we improve incrementally. We can plaster some skills on the outside, dress this way and stand this way, and they're helpful to an extent, but they're not going to do anything on the inside unless you take some steps to manage that in the moment.
That just goes so much deeper than, generic advice.
100%.
And do you ever come across anyone who you believe is only giving generic advice to people, and just knowing that you can go deeper, based on not just your programs, but your experiences. And I can imagine that has come about because you've remained an open learner. You've always taken the opportunity to learn something new, even just from the way you describe how you gained your suite of skills. Doesn't matter where we get our information from, as long as, you know, we remain open. So yes, I forgot what my point was. I forgot what my question was.
I guess confident communication skills, and there are many trainers out there peddling that. And, you know, I'm not going to criticise them all because I don't know specifically what all of them do. But there is certainly a lot of promises of, you know, work with me for a day and I can transform you into a confident communicator. Look, there are definitely skills you can practice that will help, but this is a long game and it's a life's work. I say to my clients, it's like having a shower. You don't just do it once and go, I'm good, thanks. I'm done. We've got to keep revisiting it because stuff comes up, life gets in the way, and it's those inner conversations that's the engine room of everything else about the way you communicate. So if we're not taking care of that, we're only doing not even half the job. So it's got to be at multiple levels, but we have to talk about the inner state. And you're right about the learning. I mean, I've been around for a long time, but look, I learn something pretty much every day in this space. Whenever I'm with an audience, whenever I'm with a group or an individual leader, I learn so much from them. And I always like to talk about it in Olympic terms because I was an Olympic announcer. Go for gold. We've got to go for gold. Olympic athletes, they're always looking for that little 1%er. And when they get the gold, what do? They go for the next one. So we can't ever stop. That's my philosophy. Absolutely.
Exactly. And I'm a true believer in that. And I think, you know, if we remain an island, we can't grow. What's that phrase? It says, don't be the smartest person in the room. Always, you know, be around people that you could potentially learn something from. And I think there's a lot in that. And I think learning to communicate effectively takes a certain level of vulnerability and being willing to dig a little bit deeper. So do you find that, you know, you attract the kinds of clients where people are ready to do that kind of work?
More and more, definitely. And I guess if they're not open to that, they discover that fairly early on, and we're probably not a great fit. But yes, and you know, as I said earlier, what I've discovered is truly great leaders, and that doesn't necessarily mean the job title, you know, is fancy. A truly great leader can be anybody at any level, but remain coachable and, you know, understand exactly as you say. It's not enough to be competent at what you do. That's essential. You have to be, and you have to be seen to be competent, but that must be balanced by your ability to connect with people, to have rapport, to enable people to feel safe and respected in your presence. And truly great leaders, truly great communicators get that balance, and they actively work to maintain that rather than just blurting information at people, which so many do, or going too far the other way and wanting to be everybody's friend, but avoiding the tough conversations or the tough news when they've got to tell their team about a change that no one's going to like. They avoid it, and that's not helpful. So we've got to always be working on that balance of credibility, as I call it. That's really where I start when I work with leaders, and we build up both sides of that equation.
Right. So is it just leaders that you work with? Are there other types of roles that like to, you know, get advice
Look,
from
I
you?
work with people at all levels of organisations. I guess leaders tend to gravitate toward me because I do talk and work in that pressure communication space. But equally, you know, I've done a lot of work with, I guess, middle manager teams, so, you know, senior manager teams, and even whole staff cohorts, depending on the size of the organisation or the audience. Because regardless of your role, your job, your place in life, we can all learn to be more positively influential in our communication. I mean, you know, the world's in a pretty sad state, isn't it? And I truly believe if we can communicate clearly with each other, we'll feel safer and more connected. And I think that's what most of us need right now. And that really starts with everybody at an individual level.
Yeah, communication is absolute key. We can get the wrong idea so easily. And I can imagine you've seen so many different transformations. Do you have a transformation or two in mind where you've been really impacted, or it's just, you've gone, wow, that this is a real standout moment?
There have been so many, Rachel, and I work with a lot of leaders in kind of crisis situations, and so some of it I can't really share. But one of my favourite experiences in recent times was I had the privilege of working with the then Chief of Defence, General Angus Campbell. It was in 2020, and some of you might remember this. General Campbell, as the Chief of Defence, had the terrible job of standing up in front of the Australian public and the world and taking responsibility for alleged war crimes committed in Afghanistan by some of our most elite service personnel. Now, this is a very contentious issue and it's still going on, but that piece of communication, again, it was a privilege working with him to help him prepare for the delivery of that piece of information. And this is the mark of the leader, and one of the things, again, that I learned, that even though you're the Chief of Defence, and when I was engaged to work with him, my imposter syndrome went berserk. What am I going to teach this man? He was entirely coachable, and he understood that he needed to get this right. This was so important. He needed to land this message and make it very clear. And so we worked together for quite a few months. And while he is an incredible man and a very articulate communicator, what we needed to work on was him connecting with the audience, because he's an army general. It's a very, very serious message, but we had to find a way, even in a delivery of news that awful, to have some empathy and some vulnerability. And he just delivered that so beautifully. He took that on, he did the work, and even hard-nosed journalists, after that piece of communication, wrote the most amazingly glowing things. Not about the message. The message was diabolical, but about the delivery, how credible he was, how transparent he was. And I tell you what, as an old journal, I'd never seen that before, because we're pretty good at slagging off our senior leaders. People said that was a terrible thing to hear, but didn't do a great job of communicating it. And that's what it's all about. So that absolutely stands out for me, and I learned so much from that, and that's added to my suite of my toolkit that I bring to other leaders.
Yes, every experience that you spend with someone, working with them closely, it's not just a one-way street. You come away with stuff yourself, and it just really speaks to the man as well, doesn't it? That he, as you say, he did the work, but he was willing to be vulnerable and take on that other side of that public persona of the Army General. What a transformation. I think that's incredibly inspiring. And let's not forget that. I think of, different kinds of transformations, like, like makeovers and people getting, new teeth, or it can just make such a difference to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. Have you ever worked with anyone who has really resisted what you've got to say?
Yes, I'm having a bit of a giggle there, because sometimes in organisations, it might be the head of communications, or maybe the CEO brings me in to work with a leader who's a bit of a hostage. They don't necessarily, they haven't really volunteered, but because of some issues with the way they communicate, I've been asked to work with them. So that can certainly happen. I certainly wouldn't ever think that I've worked with any lost causes. There's always, we find a way, and there's always something, even if they're not fully open to changing up what they do, because look, sometimes people have a perception of their level of dynamism and skill that's not really matched with how they come across. We'll always find a way. And sometimes there is a bit of a turnaround, and I'm able to get a bit of a foothold, and they start to see, and they start to notice people relating to them differently. They're probably my favourite ones, actually, when you've got a bit of a harder nut to crack, and then they come around. So look, we're all on different life journeys, aren't we? You don't know the background of that person. And sometimes it is their own insecurity that makes them cling on to, this is the way I communicate, it's the way I've always done it, and I'm not going to change. So, I guess it's about meeting people where they are, isn't it? It's not ever forcing anything down their throat. It's learning as much about them, and this is a communication principle for everyone, learning as much about your audience as an individual or a group as you can, meeting them where they are and starting
Yeah.
from there. It's never a pushing situation.
Yeah.
It's an act of service. What do you need from me? What can I? How can I be of
Yeah.
value? What can I give you that's going to help?
Yes.
That's the approach and the mindset that's most effective.
Yes, and it becomes a very bespoke experience, very tailored experience, I would imagine. Am I right?
Definitely working one-on-one. I mean, I'm sure you experience this, Rachel,
Yeah.
in the work that you do. It's not a one size fits all. You know, we humans are beautifully diverse creatures. It would be easier if we were all the same, but of course, it wouldn't be half as much fun. So definitely in
Yeah.
those very, I guess, intimate sessions, in front of an audience is very different though, because you've got to,
Yeah.
you'll have all types of communication and learning styles, and so you really have to make sure that you're just sprinkling a little bit for everybody in those situations. So that's a different approach.
So, so which is your favorite? Do you like to work with people one-on-one or in groups, keynote speaking, or maybe you just feel like, I feel like doing this today, or
It's hard
it can
to choose
change?
because it's really about, I just love being of service and seeing those shifts. But I think if I had to pick, I am a performer at heart. I think that you cannot beat the
Yes.
feeling of being on stage, feeling like you're in flow. That that that
Yeah.
feeling that the audience is with you. That
Mm.
doesn't always happen for a variety of reasons. But I was doing a
Yeah.
keynote yesterday and just had that beautiful feeling that the audience was just with me. And now it really becomes a beautiful dance or a conversation where I'm
Yeah.
talking, but they're responding in their minds. Because really, for any speaker, it's not about you and how beautiful your message is. It's actually about their experience. They're listening to you, but
Yes.
they're thinking about their own life and their own situation. It's how that they meet themselves when they see you on stage. I think if you can approach it from that energy, that's where the magic truly happens.
Yeah.
Not, look at me, I'm a speaker.
Yeah, yeah. Because if you're in that flow of giving and thinking about, yes, as you say, their experience, it's going to be much more successful. Yeah, because people can see through that. They can see through the ego. They can see through the parading or the trying to stand out, and it becomes uncomfortable watching someone trying to. Toot their own horn or stroke their own pride. But at the end of the day, if people have a good experience and they're either educated or they've got something to think about, they go away with something. You've done your job, and yeah, yeah. And it's like you get to tick all the boxes. You get to give, you get to serve people, but you also get to perform at the same time. It
It's
just sounds
wonderful. It's
ideal.
wonderful. And, you have those crazy days where you've got a bad hair day or the tech doesn't work, or the speaker before you runs overtime, and all of a sudden you've got to truncate your carefully crafted session in all the things. But
Yes.
it's live. It's a live situation, and we just have to be adaptable and just love the whole experience.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, the more you do it, the better you get at it. Based on what you do, Neryl, what are some key takeaways that our audience would benefit from in terms of what you
Well, a couple of the
teach?
key things, and I've touched on one of those already, is that critical importance of being balanced as a communicator, the competence, connection, the strength, the warmth. That applies to whether you're sending an email, writing a report, talking to your boss, all of those things. So check in with that. So I certainly teach a framework around that. But the other thing is a framework that I developed, and again, this is one of the things throughout my experience, of credibility in all types of situations. I actually call it the TIM framework. It's always very exciting when I have a TIM in the audience, like I did a few weeks ago. Starting with them, so audience first. So always thinking about who is it that I'm speaking to, whether it's 150, 500, doesn't matter. I've got some critical questions that I give the audience to ask. Usually we don't start there. We start with, what am I going to say? We've got to take a step back, think them. Second step is it. What is my message? What is my content? And I recommend a framework around that. I'm a great believer in starting with a framework, even in a conversation.
Yeah.
Conversation's a dialogue, obviously. The other person's going to be saying stuff too. But if you've got to lay out your position, then have a framework for that. Doesn't mean you're going to stick to it rigidly, but at least to prepare using that. And then the third one is what we were talking about before. It's M, which is the me. Now check in with my inner state. What's going on inside me? Because you can do the first steps flawlessly, but if you're a bundle of nerves or you're highly distracted or you're just in a fluster, you are not going to be impactful in that communication. So them first, what's going on in their world? How can I be as clear, so it's clarity in everything, as clear as I possibly can to give them certainty? And then me, what's going on inside me? What do I need to do to be as calm and centered as possible so that I can be on in that moment? So that's the TIM, the TIM framework.
I like that. I think we remember things better when there's an acronym, and particularly an acronym that spells something.
I once did an impromptu speech at an event, and I just on my feet had to think, what are my 3 points? And the acronym was POT, P-O-T. Don't judge me for that, but it was very effective. I remembered my points very easily. Yes, acronyms work, and 3 key points.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I do, particularly if I'm constructing a list in my head, is I start to list what it could be, what I'm trying to get done before my day starts. So it could be I've got to put the washing on, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my computer and then I'm going to pour a coffee. So I would say to myself, washing computer, coffee, and then I would construct a melody around it. I'd turn it into a song and I start to sing it under my breath, and I just, and once I deal with every step, I readjust the song. So, singing and music also creates some ease as well. So highly recommend. There's my tip for the day.
Because we're saving our brain's energy. Now you're not having to think, oh, what was it I'm doing next? You've just created this beautiful musical framework to do that. Just saving us energy so that we can then be present with what we're doing.
Oh yeah, we've got so much to think about. So Neryl, if people wanted to get in contact with you to book your services or just to tell you how fabulous you are, how can they get in contact
I guess all
with
the
you?
usual ways. I have a website. It's just my name, neryleast.com. Neryl is like Cheryl with an N, bit of a strange one. Apparently it's Welsh. Who knew? Anyway, neryleast.com. So that's kind of got all the central things that I do. LinkedIn is where I predominantly hang out in a business sense. So that's probably a great place to connect with me. But love to chat, love to see where you're at with your communication and how I might be able to support you and, give you some little tips that might make a big difference to what's going on for you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It has been such a pleasure chatting with you today, Neryl. I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing about what you're about. I'm not going to forget Tim. Tim and I are going to hang out.
You could write a
for
song
little
about
bit.
Tim.
I could write a song about Tim. I'll let you know. And I'm sure that everyone listening to this will be fascinated by your stories and your advice. So thank you so much for your time today.
You're
very
welcome, Rachel. Thanks, everybody.
So everyone, I hope you enjoyed this interview. I'm very sure you have. This show goes live every Thursday at 11 a.m. on YouTube and will be uploaded straight to LinkedIn and Facebook. If you need a speaker, then please go to womenspeakers.com.au, and you don't have to pay a commission. You can contact your preferred speaker directly, and you can search by topic and location. You are also welcome to post a request into our Facebook and LinkedIn groups called Australian Women Speakers. And if you're a speaker or want to be, sign up to our directory and get found. I'm Rachel Pietsch. Thank you so much for joining me